So first pose this evening for our class, I'm actually going to use the bolster to lie on, but it's kind of optional. I'm going to use it because I'm going to have my back in the pose that I'm doing a bit more restorative, with the back and the spine much flatter. So I'm actually going to lay the bolster in towards my body. My knees are just far enough apart to go either side of the bolster. And then you can let your chin turn to whichever side you like. But it's not putting quite so much pressure in the upper back and the middle back area. Now, if you don't have a bolster, not to worry. You can always come into child's pose and just allow yourself to maybe take the brick and the block to lift up so your head is in a slightly higher position. So those props would be underneath your head. And we'd be doing pretty much the same thing. We're only going to be here for about 2 minutes in total, so not a huge amount of time. And enough time to allow the knees to get used to the idea of being compressed. Same for the hips. If they're a little bit sticky, this is a nice introduction to stretching those hip muscles out and the buttocks. And settling the breath. And we'll start to lift ourselves up from that. I'm actually going to roll the bolster out to the side and come up onto all fours. Bring the knees more underneath the hips. And if you need to, allow yourself to stretch the legs out just to say hello to the back of your knees, get the blood flowing around again. And then we're going to come into a melting heart pose. So we're going to try and keep the hips where they are directly above the knees, so that 90-degree angle in the legs. And then walk the hands a little wider than the shoulders out towards the front of the mat. And allow the chest to sink down to the floor. And see if you can let your breath soften. Try not to walk the hands too far forwards. The reason they say that is that if you lift your shoulders up very high around your ears, they already start to get a little bit tense. So it's just walking them out a nice distance to allow you to soften easily into the pose. And then we're going to walk the hands in, so we push our bottom towards the back of the mat. It's like you're going to come back into child's pose. But as we start to sit up, I am going to take the brick, it could be the block, but I'm going to use the brick this evening, and bring the knees together, take the feet out wide, and taking the brick behind, I'm going to sit down so both sitting bones are actually sitting on top of that brick. Excuse me, got a runny nose. And you want to be comfortable in the knees, in the ankles. So if you're able to sit right down on the floor and feel comfortable in that specific range of your body, then that's fine. But for me, this is a comfortable place. I'm going to take the arms out wide, just in line with the chest. I'm going to bring the arms into what we call eagle arms. I'm going to bring the left arm across and take the right arm over the top. Bending the arms at the elbows. I'm going to see if I can bring the hands together and wrapping the palms into each other. And then begin to let the elbows sink gently down in towards my chest. And encourage the shoulders to move a little bit towards the back of the mat. So I don't want to be pulling excessively, but I want to be trying to move my shoulders in that direction behind me. Now, another way of doing this pose is actually, if you're a little bit tricky through the forearms and the wrist, is you just take your fingers around, holding on to your shoulder blades themselves. So it's like you're giving yourself a big hug. You want to be able to breathe in relatively gently, smoothly, and long. Even though we're staying in the pose, we want to be able to feel the chest kind of expanding out and compressing in. And obviously with the arms in that position, that's going to be a little bit restricted. So there is something to work against, but only lightly. So release the arms out gently. And we'll cross them over the opposite way. Take our time to wrap the hands around. You could obviously hold on to a thumb if you can't get the palms to face in towards each other. And just let the elbows sink down. Now, if your body is like mine, you might find it a lot easier to do this on one side than the other, or maybe both sides are easy, or maybe both sides are a challenge. Anything and everything is normal in this practice of yoga. Again, trying to relax the shoulder blades down and behind. Drawing the hands in towards the face a little bit more rather than letting them drop away. And doing your best to relax the shoulders. There's quite a lot going on. There's the chest, the tops of the shoulders, down by the sides of the neck, into the tops of the arms, and then underneath the shoulder blades and around them themselves. I'll continue to work on those shoulders as we release in the hands. I'm going to lift our body up and just move the brick out of the way. We come down onto the elbows. I'm going to work on the shoulders and the spine together. Now, the knees again might be a little bit stiff, so just ease them out slowly. Allow the hips to come down to the ground. Ideally, you want your elbows directly underneath your shoulders. If they're behind, it'll push your shoulders forwards, and we really want them to kind of relax a little bit. Now, actually letting the chest rest down to the floor and relaxing the belly, the lower back, and the spine. So the shoulders are just literally propping me up. Forearms are on the ground, more or less parallel to each other, palms facing down. Head position is really entirely up to you. I'm keeping my head a little up, just so that I can keep my eye on the clock. But if you find that you want to drop your head down, that's fine as well. Now let myself come down to the ground. Going to take the elbows out wide and just lay the chin on the back of my hands. That could be the forehead as well, which is more easy for you to accomplish. Brought the feet together on the mat, and then I'm going to slowly draw my right knee out to the side, about 90 degrees to my body, and allow the shin to move off of the mat so that the shin bone runs parallel to the side of the mat. I'm going to turn the head to the right as well and lay that down. Toes of that foot are pointing out. Now you'll notice that your hip is very high off of the ground. It could be a couple of inches. Nice to sort out my hay feet. And also, it puts quite a lot of strain in sort of lower part of your back into the top of the pelvis here, where the spine comes down and feeds into the pelvis. There's actually sort of a cartilagey type of material between the pelvis and spine, and that's being stretched out. So doing our best to let ourselves really sink down into the floor, relaxing fully. It's ironic that I spend the whole day with hay fever with a dry nose, and as soon as I start to teach, I get a runny nose. And there we go. I'll start to bring the leg back onto the mat. Lengthen the legs out, give the hips a little bit of a shake and allow them to kind of have an opportunity to feel like they come back into alignment. I'm going to take the feet out a little wider than I think my hips are, so my heels start to roll out a little bit, just naturally to the side. And then I'm going to lift up again into that Sphinx pose. But if you want to, if there's space available in your back, you can move that into seal pose. The way you would do that is to lift the elbows away from the ground. So now the shoulders are being sort of pushed more towards the back of the mat. You can walk the hands in as far as is comfortable, but the breathing shouldn't be affected by that. Now, depending on your spine, you're either going to be able to lift up very easily because you have big gaps, or possibly the Sphinx pose down on the elbows will be high enough for you to lift. So I'm not trying to lift myself away from the floor. I'm letting myself compress down into the spine very gently, letting those tummy muscles relax. We don't spend a lot of time here for this second one. And then again, I'll start to walk the hands and elbows down to the ground. We come into the first of two shoulder stretches. I'm going to describe them as best I can, but hopefully you can see on the screen as well. We'll start with the feet together on the center line of the mat and taking my hands out to the side, palms facing down. So the hands are now sort of crucifix style in line with my chest. I'm going to bring, first of all, my left hand in towards my rib cage. Press down onto the left hand and roll into the right side of my body. Now I'm going to be able to let my head rest on the ground as my hips are stacked one on top of the other. and my eyes are looking to the left side of the mat. Also, as I came in, I walked my right hand out a little bit further with the fingertips. So I kept a nice stretch there and lots of space. Now, some people will find it difficult to sit on the hips and stack the hips. They'll be rolling around a lot. That's happening. You just allow yourself to put a little bit of a bend in the knee. Or alternatively, you could put quite a significant bend in the knee and then take the top leg and bring the foot to the floor with the knee pointing up towards the ceiling, and more or less your foot positioned behind the line of your knee that is bent underneath you. An alternative to that would be to extend the toes of the bottom leg right out to the corner edge of your mat, over to the left. There's a few options there. The idea is you're trying to move to a position where it feels like your hips and your shoulders are stacked. Now, if you're able to take your hand, left hand away from the floor, you can bring that onto your hip or onto the thigh of your left leg that's pointing up towards the sky, as long as that doesn't cause you to fall down to the ground. Getting more of a stretch into that. And if that feels okay, you could even take your hand behind you and just place the hand flat to the ground, somewhere just out of the way, like a reverse bind that you would practice in other forms of yoga styles. And that just allows you to open the joint up more. So again, depending on the shape of your shoulder, a bit like the shape of your spine, how far you move to easily and comfortably will be different from body to body. Should be able to feel a stretch in the joint. That's what we're looking for, but not a sensation of pain. Always move away from that. And the breathing should be very easy and natural. I'm going to start to move out just purely so I can have a little look at the clock and see where we are for time. That's cool. We'll take a little breath from there. Allow yourself to roll down to the floor. So untangle yourself and wriggle your fingers out in the right hand until it feels like your shoulder and your arm have come back to life if there's any tingling sensation. And then we'll walk the left hand out, roll across. You can always use a block underneath the side of the head if the head doesn't reach the floor easily. Bottom leg can be straight, bent, or pointing out to the corner edge. Top leg, you can bend your knee towards the sky, foot flat to the floor, with the foot more or less behind the knee of the bottom leg. And if you're able to, and it feels safe, you can take your hand away so you're drawing the weight behind you a little bit. Again, if you want to, just take the hand behind, very loose reverse bind, just moving the weight backwards a little bit. And we'll start to untangle ourselves. Gently bring the chest back to the floor. Wriggling the fingers out again. We'll eventually bring the hands underneath the chin. Bring the feet together on the center line. Once you've wriggled out and think your body is more or less straight, allow your left leg to go out to the side 90 degrees to your body. And the shin out to the, running down the line of the mat, the toes pointing out. You can turn the head to the left as well. We'll leave the chin on the back of the hands, or you could have your forehead there as well. It's quite a nice feeling. Relax the shoulders as much as you can to encourage more relaxation in your hips. So just balancing out, taking the second side. With this big hip stretch. It's primarily joint opening that we're looking for. So working into the ligaments and the tendons. And I'll untangle the legs. Slide that leg back. Just allow a moment for the hip to kind of adjust itself. Feet about hip distance apart if you have the room. And then we'll lift back up. Now, we're going to come up onto the elbows to move into this pose. Some people actually like to bring the bolster underneath their chest, so it would run underneath their arms. Arms would be over the top of the bolster, which would be kind of like that position. So that's giving them enough height to work into this shoulder stretch. So just consider how you feel when you move into it, and if it doesn't feel good, maybe you want to pick the bolster back up and move it underneath. So taking the hands out much as we did before in that seal pose, I'm going to take the left arm out to the right side and use the fingers to walk the right arm and hand all the way to the other side. So the hands are now 180 degrees apart. I'm going to wriggle through the shoulders a little more and walk the fingers out so that I get a deep stretch. And then I'm going to let the chin just rest against the arms. Hopefully you're still able to breathe. Try to relax the shoulders down towards the tailbone as I came into the pose. So the shoulders are not lifted up around my ears, they're kind of in a nice middle position. And let's allow myself to breathe here. You want to be able to still swallow and breathe in easily. So providing you can do the two of those things, the strong sense of stretch underneath your shoulder blades and across your chest into your shoulder joints will be easy to tolerate, or easier to tolerate, If you're struggling to breathe and swallow. Breathing and swallow might mean that it's better to bring that bolster underneath if that's problematic for you. Just being a little higher can make a difference. Almost coming to the end of that. Now to come out of this, you actually need to draw your tummy muscles in a little bit as you exhale. Press your thighs into the floor. That'll activate a little bit into your back muscles, allow you to lift just fractionally to take the weight out of your arms, and then you can walk your right arm back out, untangle the left. We'll stay there just for a little while, just kind of let the shoulders to move. I feel like they're moving down your back a little bit more. And then we'll start on the second side. So this time I'm going to take the right hand out to the left, first of all, across the body, and then walk the left hand out. Use the fingertips to walk each respective arm out as far as I can achieve, and then let the chin drop. Again, really having to focus the mind on those shoulders and work out where I'm holding on, and see if I can then start to relax those muscles. Now, chances are that once you start to focus on one muscle group, relax them, something else will start to feel alarmingly tight. You have to move your focus to that, and just keep moving around your body a little bit in that way. And then it's time to lift up from there. So again, press the thighs down, draw the tummy muscles in, exhale, and untangle your arms as best you can. Now I'm going to let myself come all the way down to the floor, just with the elbows out wide, and let the arms relax a little bit first before I move into the next pose. Or again, the next pose, that bolster might be useful for us to have across the front of the mat. You don't really know until you start to move into the pose, and you can decide where you want to be then. Going to lift away from the ground. Now things feel like they've returned to normal a little bit. Peel away from the floor or roll onto your side and lift you up from there. Both of those methods work very well. We're going to come into a swan pose. So I'm going to bring the knees together so they touch underneath my hips. Hands are a little wider than the shoulders, just fractionally. Fingers pointing forwards. I'm going to take my left knee to the outside of my left wrist and bring the heel more or less underneath my groin. I'm not going to move it any further forwards than that. If it feels difficult to move your heel that far in, that's fine. You just move it to where it's comfortable. So I'm able to start to walk my right foot away. And I'm going to be here for a couple of minutes on each side. And that can be a little bit strong on the wrist. So a nice option can be to bring the bolster into play and allow yourself to just bring your elbows and forearms up there. So as long as the elbows are directly underneath the shoulders, you can kind of sink your shoulders down a little bit and let yourself collapse into the pose. And you're still getting that stretch into the shoulders and chest, but we're also doing the hip, the knees, and the ankles, nice and strong openings for them. Head position, really up to you, whether you want to be looking forwards or letting the head drop. You might want to try each and see what feels better. For me, I find that if I let my head drop, it feels like I'm overstretching the muscles in the neck. Um, and that's not really an advantage to do that. Quite happy for my shoulders just to be moving around and getting some mobility and opening. If you start to stretch the muscles, you tend to tighten the body up a little bit when that happens. And just doesn't feel like it would serve me particularly well. There is a choice that is personal to each person in their practice. So allow yourself to find what works. And we'll begin to come out of this. So we'll bring the hands to the ground, bolsters out of the way. Nice way of coming out of that is to just gently roll onto the side of your hip if you can and bring your knees forwards. And then you're in a position to come back up onto all fours again, nice and easy to extract yourself. Or you could walk your rear leg in with the toes, and kind of lift yourself back up into this tabletop position. Whichever way you get to it, start with the knees together, directly underneath the hips, hands underneath the shoulders. We'll take the right knee out. Be considerate as to where I'm placing the heel. So just lining that up with the groin. Walking the legs back on the back foot. That's my left leg, just using the toes to ease my way out. And that allows me to sink the hips down to the floor. Again, I'm going to use the bolster myself to sink in. I'll take the elbows a little wider this time, just so that I change the emphasis of force in the shoulder muscles. And interestingly enough, tonight, this leg feels very different to the opposite side. I don't particularly know why, but previous leg, I felt it very much in the joints. This I'm feeling in the muscle and the joints. A little bit of tightness there that I hadn't noticed before I started the class. I'm thankful for my body to let me know. And as I'm relaxing into this, I can feel that tightness disappearing out of those muscles. Kind of pleasant feeling. The belly is relaxed, shoulders relaxed, back leg is very soft. If you find yourself kind of rolling off to the side a little bit, as long as you don't feel in danger of falling out of the pose, that's fine. Just stay where you are. and we move from there. Again, if you're able to, just roll onto the side, extract yourself from the pose, come back onto all fours. I'm going to use the bolster again, relatively close to me. So, moving the beagle hairs out of the way. Hands on the bolster, toes are tucked underneath. I'm just going to lift myself knees away from the floor, legs open out gently, and then walk the feet in until it feels like my feet are underneath my hips, with the legs relatively straight, let the head hang. Going to keep the hands on the bolster, so I'm not reaching down to the floor, but I have got a nice, decent forward bend taking place. And to try and relax my tummy muscles, although they are drawn in a little bit, let's try and keep them a little bit soft. I'm purposely going to try and have the weight feel very even in the feet, so the legs are straight here. If you need to lift higher, you can do. You can put the block underneath the bolster to bring that up into further. You could even, if you have multiple blocks, make yourself a nice big stack. Some people will feel confident enough in their lower back muscles and their discs to take their hands away from the floor or the bolster or the blocks and just take hold of the forearms, make a little hammock to rest your head. Now, if that doesn't feel good in the back of your legs and your spine, bring your hands back down onto the floor. If you don't feel like you want to move into that phase, then that's fine as well. It is called a dangle pose or dangling. So the emphasis is trying to let yourself fold your body and enjoy the free gift of gravity drawing you down towards the floor. But it does require the back of your legs to open up. If they're not in the condition where you can do that, then you need to be proactively thinking about looking after your back and your legs and bringing your hands to the floor. Gradually sink in lower the legs. We're trying to keep the weight even, not too much in the toes, not too much into the heels. Head relaxed. We'll take one breath here. Get the hands back onto the bolster. Just lift up a little bit so we can look towards the front of the mat. Push my bolster or move the blocks out of the way. Soften the knees. Come back down onto the hands and knees. And I'm going to take this one flat block, place it underneath my bar, and allow myself to sit on the block. It's easy as that. Now I'm going to bring the heels in towards the groin. If you need to cross your ankles, then do. But if you're able to bring heel to heel, then you'll have the benefit of your knees being very much lower. So it's kind of a stylistic thing. You can still come into that with the ankles bent a little bit, but it might leave you not being able to move forward quite so much. So if you're higher and you find forward folding with your legs in this position tricky, you can take the bolster and bring it in towards your chest and just lean into that until you get to a comfortable position. And you can take the arms around if they're long enough and just hold on to the end of the bolster. You can even drop your chin onto the bolster as well. So this is really pressing into your heart, and you would just move that incrementally out. Hopefully the sticky mat has got enough stickiness in it for you to move to wherever you want to. Well, some people will be able to get down further and bring their chest down onto the bolster, and some people will be able to get even further than that. This is primarily a stretching of the hips, just in a different direction from the previous pose. A little deeper into the legs. If you are finding that you're slowing back, lace off the legs down, that really isn't what we're trying to do. turn your head either way, or again have chin on the back of the hands. You could have your forehead down there, whatever is easy for you to sit in. Try and relax the shoulders to encourage those hips to release. Soft belly. Breathe. Now let those lift up slowly. And make a note of which leg is in front. So the first leg I'm going to take out, and we shall call that leg number 1. The second leg comes out, call that leg number 2. And then we'll bring leg number 1 back in, follow that with leg number 2, and now we have successfully, without thinking about it, crossed the legs the opposite way around. Allow yourself to hinge gently from the hips. Use the bolster as you need. You could alternatively have it going crossways and have the elbows in. That's another way of coming into the pose, which is nice and comfortable. For most of us, crossing the legs over the second side, we're moving into the less natural way for us to fold our legs in. So it's going to feel a little weird and odd at the best of times. So allow yourself to consider whether the feelings you're having are from that, or whether you've moved in deeper than you need to into the pose. Guided by the breath, as long as it's easy and you can relax your belly, then you're in a pretty good place. And we'll start to lift out of that as well. I'm going to allow the legs to untangle and take them out in front of me. Now we're still sitting on the block, so I want the legs to be flat to the floor. I'm going to lift, just shuffle forwards a little bit, and then let the legs lengthen out. Now for some people, if they're very tight in the back of the legs and in their lower back, this right angle position is going to be pretty tricky and would stop them being able to stretch the legs out flat to the floor. If that's the case, just take the hands behind. Allow yourself to lean back enough so that you can feel your legs relaxing down towards the ground. This is just a sort of a transitory pose that we're moving through. We don't want to add tension to the body. If you're able to sit a little more upright, if that feels natural to you, that's fine. But ask yourself, are the legs feeling tense? Are they able to rock out and move to their natural position? So for me, my legs too feel relaxed. My toes roll considerably out to the side. So my shins and my thighs are no longer pointing towards the sky. I kind of roll onto the outside edge of my heels. whatever feels good for you. Okay. Now I'm going to move back up onto the block. And in my case, I'm going to turn side on, so I'm facing directly to the camera. You can stay facing towards the front of your mat. But I'm going to move back up onto the block. I'm going to bring the feet back in towards the body. Again, if you're able to get heel to heel, that's great. If not, crossing the ankles a little. Now, taking the bolster out to my left side, and I'm going to place one hand there. I'm going to lift the right arm up towards the sky, and then drop my arm over the crown of my head, so it's nice and relaxed. I'm going to let the hand sort of dangle down. I'm going to slowly start to lean out towards the left and bring my elbow onto the bolster. So I'm coming into a side bend, but a fairly easily maintained one. Again, I'm going to be able to sink into the shoulder that's underneath. I'm going to try and keep the chest pointing, in your case, towards the front end of the mat, so the chest is open, rather than rolling the rib cage down to the floor. To kind of encourage it to move in the opposite direction towards the sky a little. And to encourage the opening in the body, I'm trying to let my right leg relax down to the floor. Now, it was on the ground and it stayed on the ground, but it's kind of hovering just that little bit. You know, I can feel some weight has moved from the leg. So I'm trying to let that relax down, as well as relaxing down the side of my body and into the armpit. You probably won't be too surprised to find out that they are actually all connected. Okay, I'll take a little breath from there. Lift the top arm up. Bring the hand down alongside my body. That will help with a little bit of weight. And then I can push gently away from the side. And I can feel that immediately down the side of my body. And I can also feel that in the right side of the spine, low down, sort of between the ribs and the pelvis, this big stretch. I'm going to cross the legs over the opposite way. So same technique. Call it number one, call it number two, cross it in. Take the hand out to the right this time. Got a little bit more idea of where you need to place that. I take the left arm up, fold that over, relax the arm. Slowly work my way into bending the elbow. These are all the pleasant feeling, stretching out and sinking in as we relax into the pose. Possibly a combination of all the other movements we've taken in the class so far. I'm not sure this would feel quite so pleasant if this was the very first pose we've chosen to do this evening. I'm going to lift my way back out of that. And tangle the legs. For the next pose, I'm going to possibly need the strap. It kind of depends on how long your body is and how long your arms are and how much mobility you have in your shoulders generally. And I'm also going to use, my friend, the bolster. Across the front edge of the mat, move off of the block and allow myself to settle myself on top of the bolster. So my chest digs in. So I'm looking for that to be sort of around the bottom rib area. And I appreciate that that might be a challenge for some people to get in that position. You could do this with chest flat to the floor and maybe just using a cushion underneath the forehead if you wanted to go lower. I'm simply going to start to bend my right knee and bring my heel in towards my buttock. Now I'll take my right arm back and see if I can find my foot and encourage that heel down towards my buttock. If I can't, I'm going to make a little lasso out of the strap and then see if I can find my foot and bring it a little closer in. So I'm just easing that into the buttock and leaning on the bolster. I'm going to take the opposite hand back. So I've now got both hands easing the heel in towards the buttock. I'm trying to let the hips sink down to the floor. So the bolster is becoming very useful. So it is a free back bend for me because I'm leaning on top of the bolster. And heel in towards my bum. Again, the head can drop if it needs to. You can keep it in line, whatever feels easiest for you. I find if I drop the head, it just feels like my neck and my shoulders are doing more work than if I hold them. But you know, different people, different cups of tea. Now I'm going to be able to release gently, one hand at a time, and then let the foot come gently back down to the floor. Just be careful to maneuver around the kneecap a little bit rather than slapping the foot back down to the floor. And then I'm going to carefully bend the opposite leg, left hand back, ease the heel in. When I feel ready and confident, if I get to that point, take both hands back. The elbows are sort of pointing somewhere towards the sky. I do find that I sort of slide down the bolster, which is why I start really with the bolster feeling like it's underneath the bottom of my ribs, because by the time I finish, I'm not in the same place. I'm trying to relax the leg muscles. It's a big stretch into those front thighs. Trying to keep the shoulders relaxed as well. Enjoying my free back bend. And it's time to release again. Hands come round. Negotiate with the leg down to the floor. And from here, I'm going to use the hands underneath my body a little more and push away from the bolster. I'm going to come up slowly. Because we've had a back bend, I just want to take it easy coming into that. I'm going to sit the hips down to the floor. And I'm going to come back down onto my spine for Shavasana. In my case, I'm just going to take the bolster and place that underneath the back of my knees. My heels are out towards the corner edges of the mat. I'm able to do this pose quite comfortably, taking the block behind for the back of the head, and easing the elbows down towards the floor, and then using the tummy muscles a little bit to roll the spine down. But if that is troublesome, roll onto your side body first. Allow yourself to then roll down onto your spine. So take it as easy as you can in your lower back. You should always be able to breathe as you're moving into these poses. As you notice, I was able to talk relatively comfortably all the way through without straining the voice. So looking after myself, understanding how the body kind of moves through the spine, not holding rigid. The eyes closed, I'll take the hands out to the sides a little bit. So palms facing up. I wriggle the shoulders underneath and relax those. Toes are pointing towards the outside edge of the mat. Legs are rolled out a little bit. But if that's not where your legs naturally go, then just allow them to find their own space. My knees are wider apart than my hips are wide. Trying to lengthen the spine. Now, some people like to press their heels into the floor, press into the bolster a little bit, and lift their tailbone away from the ground just to allow themselves to place the spine and the pelvis a little flatter to the ground so it decompresses the discs a little more. You're able to do that if that's needed in your body, then do. Some of that is because of the way I came in to the pose and rolling down from that forward facing position, side position. That happens a little less. Okay. Start to wiggle the fingers and toes. Allow the wrists and the ankles to begin to move as we breathe a little deeper into the body. Waking ourselves up slowly, bringing the nervous system into our breath and our body. And then when you feel ready, allow yourself to intuitively stretch in any way that feels good. Think of these poses as, or these stretches as compassionate stretches. So soft and gentle, just feeling what your body needs, treating the muscles very gently with the utmost of respect. When you feel ready, allow yourself to slide your heels over the bolster, kind of dragging your legs in, and everything is sinking towards your body. You can take your hands around the shins or on top of the knees. You can rock a little bit from side to side. You can circle the knees and the hips around a little bit if that felt necessary. And then in your own time, when you're ready, we'll let ourselves roll gently over towards the right side on an exhale. Now let the legs and the feet sink to the floor. So relaxing the toes and the ankles. Now turn the chest a little more towards the ground. And then when you're ready, you can press your hands into the floor to lift yourself very smoothly from the side of the mat back up to sitting. And come into a posture that's easy for you to sit. Use your props as you need to. Sitting tall, allow the hands to come into the heart, into prayer. Take a long, slow breath in. Close your eyes gently. Yourself to drop your chin towards your chest. As your belly draws towards your spine, allow that simple bow to form. On the inhale, let it build with your breath to a long, straight spine. As the head lifts and the eyes open. Namaste. Thank you for joining me this evening. Hope your hips and your backs and your shoulders feel good after that. And I'll see you again on the mat soon.